Well, kia ora, good afternoon, everybody. As you'll be aware, Foreign Minister Winston Peters has announced the New Zealand government's decision not to recognise the state of Palestine at this time. On October the 7th, 2023, Hamas unleashed a horrific and brutal attack on innocent Israeli civilians. The worst massacre in Israel's history, with 1,200 innocent people killed and 251 people taken hostage. New Zealand immediately condemned this act of terror and hate, and like many other countries, recognised Israel's right to defend itself and its people. However, in exercising its legitimate right to defend itself, Israel has an obligation to comply with international law, which includes respecting the principle of proportionality. The New Zealand government has been clear for some time that it is our view, and one that many other countries share, that the actions of the Israeli government have been grossly disproportionate and have exacerbated and prolonged the suffering of innocent civilians. But this conflict will not end by New Zealand recognising the state of Palestine at this time. It will only end through a ceasefire reached through negotiation, dialogue, diplomacy and leadership, and that remains our focus. New Zealand designated Hamas a terrorist organisation in February 2024, and Hamas remains in control of significant Palestinian territory as the de facto government of the Gaza Strip. And it continues to hold Israeli hostages, reject Israel's right to exist, renounce terrorism, or agree to disarm. We cannot recognise a state where terrorists play a role in its government. And as we've seen, even with the CNN interview last night, Hamas refuses to take any responsibility for October the 7th. However, it remains New Zealand's position that recognition of Palestinian statehood is a question of when, not if. But with a war raging, Hamas remaining the de facto government of Gaza, and no clarity on next steps, now is not the time. As I've indicated, our decision is not an endorsement of Israel's position, UNICEF and the Red Cross, to get supplies into Gaza, bringing our total humanitarian contribution to almost $50 million. In closing, can I say that New Zealand is neither pro-Palestine nor pro-Israel. We're friends with both, and we are pro-peace. And true peace starts with a ceasefire, and that's the only way to end all of this suffering. We want to see two states, Israel and Palestine, living in peace and security, and that will only happen through negotiation, dialogue, diplomacy and leadership. And with that, I'm very happy to take a few questions. Sorry, Lisette.
What are the conditions then for when New Zealand will recognise Palestine?
Well, as Minister Peters laid out, I think there's probably two things that we need to consider. One would be very much a removal of Hamas, disarming, disbanding, and the renunciation of any violence and terrorism from all other Palestinian leaders. The second thing we need to see is continued evolution around governance, institutions, capacity building of a Palestinian future state. And we will continue to support, for example, the Palestinian Authority through investments through the Quartet and other ways to actually build that institution, that the institutions are going to be needed going forward.
How do they do that when Benjamin Netanyahu is saying he wants to annex the West Bank and they continue to occupy areas of Palestine?
Well, that's the challenge that we have. We have a situation where we have Hamas not prepared to recognise Israel. We have extreme factions within Israel wanting to continue with West Bank settlements, which we continue to call out as illegal, which we have done for many, many years and will continue to do so. But really what we need is we need reasonable leadership on both sides to come together to sit down and resolve this conflict. And irrespective of the positions on recognition, that is the main event. That is the main issue that we have before us. Sorry, I'm not going to come back to you, sorry.
Some New Zealanders may ask themselves if our close Commonwealth friends with whom we share common values like Australia, Great Britain, Canada, see value in recognising Palestine.
Well, some of our friends have pursued recognition, others haven't. And irrespective of their positions, we form our own independent assessment and with our own independent foreign policy acting in New Zealand's national interests. But irrespective of recognition, I can tell you in my conversations with those leaders and with many others over the recent weeks, is that we are all very, very united on ending this conflict and progressing the two-state solution. You've seen us actually sign up to statements even a couple of weekends ago with the French and Saudi Arabia statements to try and drive more action around the two-state solution. Our view is that the conditions are just not there to recognise a formal state now, and frankly, that is the bit that we are united around, is actually resolving and ending this conflict.
Clearly, the idea of recognising the state is symbolic, isn't it? It's a statement of intent. It's not meant to be a practical roadmap to sorting out the conflict. So isn't the value of it a symbolic value?
No, in recognising a state as a serious enterprise, you have to make sure that a state has control over its territory, its population. As I've said, you've got Hamas, a terrorist organisation, in charge, de facto government in Gaza. You've got a Palestinian Authority sitting in the West Bank. We're going to do everything we can to buttress and build the Palestinian Authority and build capacity and institutions and also governance. But at the moment we have a Hamas in government, and that is unacceptable for us to recognise any state that has a terrorist organisation in it.
Both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have said recognition of a Palestinian state would be a reward for Hamas and terrorism. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think Winston Peters outlined it really well when he talked about the line getting too tight. And what you have seen, even last night, CNN, not Fox, not MSNBC, but CNN, had a very reasonable interview, as it has had with Israeli leadership, it had with Hamas negotiators, and you saw no recognition of any of the suffering that Hamas is causing for Palestinian civilians by refusing to release 48 hostages that it still holds today. So, we have intransigence on that side, and actually you saw the Hamas leadership come out and say this recognition is actually very good, and so it advances their propaganda and their story as well. Equally, on the Israeli side, it drives into Israeli intransigence as well, where you have extremist elements coming out and talking about denying and extinguishing the two-state solution. Neither of those scenarios are good, and all that it's done is, since the countries have started recognising last year, through July and August this year, we haven't seen a material change or a shift to a ceasefire from either Hamas or Israel at this point in time. So, those are the realities that I think, Winston Peters acknowledged on the ground well in his statement.
New Zealanders have called your government cowardly, shameless, on the wrong side of history, embarrassing. Today there's been thousands of Kiwis marching in the streets over the last month and years, calling for us to do better. How does that sit with you that your government has, to a lot of New Zealanders, got this very wrong?
Well, there are New Zealanders, I agree, that will be disappointed by this decision, but equally there are New Zealanders that support this decision. And, there are strongly held feelings and views on all sides of this debate. None of this is great when we've got a conflict that's been long running and causing so much so much humanitarian suffering and a catastrophe in the Middle East. But the answer is us to get into the ceasefire process, into a peace process, and that's what we will continue to support. We are continuing to say when, not if, in terms of state recognition, but the conditions aren't there right now.
At what point in the last couple of days were you and Minister Peters still discussing what this decision would be? How recent was it that you made the decision not to declare it?
We had a good conversation last night.
And has address Winston Peters appeared to draw a link between countries recognising Palestinian statehood and the escalation by Israel of its illegal actions? How are you concerned that our allies around the world are going to perceive that?
I don't think that's the interpretation at all. This is a complex situation, and reasonable people from all sides of this debate can disagree. But irrespective of that, even in my conversations of friends of New Zealand that are not recognising and friends of New Zealand that are recognising, we are going to continue to collectively focus on what is the most important thing. It's not the recognition per se, it's actually ending this conflict. And that's the work that we'll do together.
He said that it was pushing Israel. He said that it was counterproductive. How is that not a criticism?
Well, it's alluding to what I was saying before, is that actually you've seen Hamas, and I would encourage you all to watch the interview with CNN last night, because that is quite telling and quite informative, that for Hamas, they are being emboldened by recognition, and equally Israel is being frustrated by recognition. And both are actually being very intransigent, and we're not actually getting closer to solving the problem around ceasefire. So, I get there'll be different views on recognition, I understand that, but our focus is actually on ceasefire, and that's what we've been talking about. That's why we've signed up to 80 ministerial statements in the almost 2 years of this conflict. That's why we keep joining with other countries and calling those things out. That's why we're holding Israel to account and saying, you have to stop, the illegal settlements. You have to make sure we pull back on military action. You've got to protect civilians. You've got to have unimpeded humanitarian aid in there. But equally, Hamas needs to release hostages. 1,200 innocent people were killed. The biggest massacre that Israel's ever seen. 251 people were taken hostages. 48 people are still there today, maybe 20 alive. So, there is fault at both ends here, and we've had a very balanced approach through it. I appreciate there's strong views either side, but, we as a government have to have a balanced approach.
Last couple.
Sorry.
How did that CNN interview play into your decision?
No, not at all, but I just think it's illustrative of what we've seen, and I only draw attention to it because it's my long-held position when I deemed Hamas a terrorist organisation back in February 2024, which was my decision to do that. That's how I feel very strongly about it. But I just also think it's a good counterweight to say, yes, there's challenge. We're calling out both Israel and Hamas. As I said, we're not pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. We're friends to both. We have relationships with both both entities, and we'll continue to do so.
Can you explain to New Zealanders why you're not at the UN?
Quite normal. Leaders don't go to UN every single year. I have a number of engagements, as you know, with APEC, EAS, NATO, other bilateral visits. At the beginning of the year, I have to set a calendar, and it's finding the balance of being inside New Zealand domestically as well as being offshore internationally. I will go at some future time, but it's quite a normal practice that we don't have leaders there every single year.
There are, however, a number of international leaders there. Could it be a missed opportunity to present yourself on a global stage for such an important issue?
I don't think so. I think APEC's really important. EAS is really important. NATO's really important. Sure. And so UN General Assembly meetings where 195 leaders and or foreign ministers attend is a regular occurrence, has been going on for a long time, and I will go at some time. But actually, when we set our calendar at the beginning of the year, there's other priorities for us. Yes, Simon.
Some New Zealanders might wonder to what extent concern about how the United States of America might react played into your decision?
Not at all. This was an independent decision of New Zealand. We didn't discuss it with the Americans or anybody else for that matter. We had conversations with a range of other leaders around the world, but not at all.
Cool.
Okay, thanks team.